Lishna Tova Tekatevu. Welcome to Congregation Rutgers Tzedek High Holy Days. Certainly this year will be different, but in many ways it'll be the same. Wonderful people, and wonderful prayers, and wonderful prayer leaders. I'm Dr. Robert Channon. Many of you know me from previous years as the Chief Gabbai, scurrying around, passing out honors. This year I won't have the chance to hug you or whisper in your ear, but I'm looking forward to the services, and I'm also looking forward to being able to sit still and pray with you all. Thank you.
Okay, let's get a few things out of the way right now. This is really hard. The only place you will see me these high holidays is right here, from a spot that I actually spend very little time at during a normal high holidays. My prayers are spent in the handshakes and the hugs that I get and I give while roaming the aisles and the many prayer and social spaces of our building. I will miss greeting people that I haven't seen in a year, and I will miss the enjoyment I see in all of the interactions that you have during these days. I will also miss the many bittersweet experiences that we typically have, the happiness I feel in meeting new members, as well as all the members that have been born in the last year. I'm also going to miss the emptiness from seeing those seats that had been filled every year up until now. I'm also going to miss the anxiety of wanting everything to go smoothly and be right, and the many, many hours I spend worrying about everything going well. And then I'm going to also miss the pleasure of realizing that as long as we are here together, everything already has gone well. We have no prayer, no words, nor text that can render that feeling more properly than the experience of being together here on high holidays. So we can all acknowledge this year will be different. In many obvious ways, different is simply a polite way of saying not as good. Yet if we can say this together and get it out of the way, and this is going to be the first time that I'm asking you to actually do something, say, this year will be different. Thank you. Then, and only then, can we get to the place of existing within the uniqueness of the high holidays this year, of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur 5781. So please get there, and when you do, you'll meet me, and you will see, hear, and have a heart-filled experience. So I ask that you open your Machzor to page 2, and you can read the words of welcome on the left side of the page along with me. Shalom. Shalom to those who are far off. Shalom to those who are near, says Adonai. Mighty God who listens to the poor and hears their prayer. How long will you be distant and hidden from me? Night and day I turn, calling out with a true heart, always thanking you for your kindness so great. My sovereign, my hope is in you. My heart trusts in you. As a dreamer of dreams depends on an interpreter, this I ask, hear my prayer. This I seek, not more, not less. I read these words every year on Erev Rosh Hashanah, and I always find them to be inspiring. They're challenging God as well as each of us to be comfortable within our own prayers and the words that we're able to offer, but also push us to find the words that we have struggled with, but to say them with integrity and authenticity. And I think that's what the month of Elul, our preparatory month, has been pushing us towards, to be comfortable within our own space, standing in front of ourselves, but also in front of God and our community. And it's my prayer for us these days that we find the words that we can offer with a full heart. It is now my honor to turn it over to Rachel, Cantor Rachel Rosenburg, my most wonderful colleague, who I feel blessed to be able to share the pulpit with. And we will open on page 4 for an abbreviated Kabbalat Shabbat, since it is already Rosh Hashanah. Page 4.
Shana Tova. Shabbat Shalom. We begin with the song for Shabbat. Mizmor shir leyom haShabbat, tov lodot laDonai, ulzamer leshimcha elyon, ulzamer leshimcha elyon. Lehagid baboker chasdecha, ve'emunatcha balelot, alei asor va'alei navel, alei higayon bechinor. Mizmor shir leyom haShabbat, tov lodot laDonai, ulzamer leshimcha elyon, ulzamer leshimcha elyon. Ki simachtani Adonai befo'olecha, b'maaseh yadecha aranen, magatlu maasecha Adonai, me'od amku machshevotecha. Mizmor shir leyom haShabbat, tov lodot laDonai, ulzamer leshimcha elyon, ulzamer leshimcha elyon. And we continue in the singing of Tzaddik Katamar in the middle of the page, and you'll also find a transliteration in red on the opposite side of the page. Tzaddik Katamar yifrach ke'erez bavanon yizgeh, shetulim beveit Adonai, bechatrot Eloheinu yafrichu, od yenuvun beseva, deshenim verananim yiyu, lehagid ki ashar Adonai tzuri velo avlatabo. Adonai malach keut lavesh.
In the middle of page 4, towards the bottom.
Mikolot ma'im rabim adirim mishpereyam, adir bamarom Adonai, edotecha nehemnu meod, leveitcha nava kodesh, edotecha nehemnu meod, leveitcha Nava Kodesh Adonai leorech yamim.
We rise for the Baruch Hu for the beginning of the Mariv service on page 5.
Yai lai 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 lai. Lai 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 lai, lai 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 lai, lai 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 lai, Baruch Hu et Adonai hamevorach, Baruch Adonai hamevorach le
seated. Continue with the first of the two blessings before the Shema on page 5.
Umavir yom umevi laila umavdil ben yom uven laila Adonai tzvaot shemo el chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu leolam va'ed Yai lai 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 Baruch atah Adonai ha'ma'ariv ha'aravim. Continue with Ahavat Olam on the top of page 6, and we know you're singing along at home.
I hear it.
Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael Amcha Avta Torah u'mitzvot chukim u'mishpatim otanu limadta Al ken Adonai Eloheinu b'shokveinu uvkumeinu nasiach bechukecha v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha uv'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu uvahem nege yomam v'alayla ve'avatecha tarsir mimenu li'olamim Yai lai 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 Baruch atah Adonai ohev amo Yisrael Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Continue silently on page 6 and 7.
Adonai Elohechem emet v'emunah kol sof v'kayam Aleynu. Middle of page 8 by the arrow. Umalchuto beratzon kiblu aleihem Moshe u'Miriam uvnei Yisrael lecha'anu shira besimcha rabba ve'amru chulam mi chamocha ba'edim Adonai mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh Nora tehilot osefele Malchutecha ra'uvanecha bokei hayam lifnei Moshe Ze'eli anu ve'amru Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed V'nemar ki fada Adonai et Yaakov גאלו מיד חזק ממנו, מיד חזק ממנו. ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
We turn to the Hashkivenu prayer on the top of page 9.
Help us, Adonai, to lie down in peace. Hashkivenu, Adonai Eloheinu leshalom, v'hamidenu malkeinu lechaim. By the arrow in the middle of the page. Ufros Aleynu Sukkot Shalomecha. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Baruch atah Adonai Haporei Sukkot Shalom Aleynu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. And we continue with the Shamru. Words from Sefer Shmot, from the book of Exodus. The people of Israel will always observe Shabbat. Please rise. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, ledorotam berit olam. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת, לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת, לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת, לדורותם ברית עולם.
We now turn to page 10 in preparation for the Amidah. Up until this point, we've had a normal service, the same service that would be any night or certainly any Shabbat, other than the whole YouTube portion. But here at the top of page 10, we insert a verse from the Psalms that speaks of Rosh Hashanah. And then Rachel will chant the Chatzi Kaddish, where she'll add another La'ela, well beyond in the Kaddish. And then, of course, we have the silent Amidah, which is anything but a normal Amidah. The special middle blessing on page 13 emphasizes themes of fear of God, honor, and hope for those who seek out God, but also the coming joy of those who find that place, who find the place of righteousness. And while the liturgy might be a little daunting or kind of fear-inducing, I think there's also a message of hope in here. And I think it's that message of hope over fear that we need to seek out and embrace. And right now, The liturgy is pushing us, is compelling us to begin to make our case before God as we pretend, as we see ourselves standing in a courtroom facing the judge of all judges. So now we begin on page 10, and then we will have the silent Amidah, and the formal text of that silent Amidah begins on page 11.
Tiku v'chodesh shofar b'kesel yom chagenu ki chok leYisrael hu mishpat leElohei Yaakov yitgadal veyitkadash shemei rabbah Be'amad divra kirutei V'yamlich malchutei B'chayechon Uvyomechon Uvchayedecho Beit Yisrael Ba'gala Uvizman kariv V'imenu Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam ulamei amaya yitbarach v'ishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei v'yithadar v'yit'aleh Veitalal Shmei Dekudesha Brichu Le'ela Le'ela Mikol Birchata Veshirata Tush Bechata V'nechemata Da'miran Be'ama Ve'imro Amen.
The formal text for the silent Amidah begins on page 11 and ends on page 17.
continue with the Amidah if you've not yet completed it. And then please join me in this prayer for peace. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom Aleynu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru, Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom Aleynu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru, Amen. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Continue at the top of page 18. Vayechulu hashamayim v'haaretz v'chol tzevam, vayechal Elohim bayom hashvi'i melachto asher asa, vayishbot bayom hashvi'i mikol melachto asher asa. Vayevarech Elohim et yom hashvi'i, vayekadesh oto, ki vo shavat mikol melachto, asher bara Elohim lasot. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon Konei Shamayim va'aretz. Magen Avot bidvaro, Mechayei Meitim b'mamaro, Hamelech HaKadosh, She'en kamohu, Hameniach le'amo, B'yom Shabbat kodsho, Ki vam ratza le'aniach lahem, Ki vam ratza le'aniach lahem, Lefanav navod b'yira v'fachad, v'nodeh lishmo b'chol yom tamid, me'on habrachot, el haodaot, Adon hashalom, mekadesh hashabat, Umvarech shevi, umeniach bikdusha, le'amedu shnei oneg, zecher, lemasei v'reishit. Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu. V'taher libeinu le'ovdecha, 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 le'ovdecha be'emet. V'taher libeinu le'ovdecha, 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 le'ovdecha be'emet. V'taher libeinu le'ovdecha, 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 le'ovdecha be'emet. v'taher libenu le'ovdecha, 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 le'ovdecha be'emet. Ve'anchilenu Adonai Eloheinu be'ava uvratzon Shabbat kodshecha. Ve'anuchu va'Yisrael mekadshei shemecha. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat.
We turn to page 19 for Kaddish Shalem, the full Kaddish.
Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabba amen ve'alema divrach hirutei ve'amlich malchutei b'chayechon uve'yomechon uv'chayedecho beit Yisrael ba'agala uv'izman kariv ve'imeru Amen. Yeheshme Rabba mevarach le'alam u'lamei amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemei dekudesh abrichu le'ela le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata Tushbechata v'nechemata damiran be'ama ve'imeru amen. Titkabal soton uvauton lechol Yisrael kodam avuhon divishmaya ve'imru amen. Yehesh lama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleynu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav hu yaseh shalom Aleynu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru amen. Amen. And before we do Kiddush together, I'd like to sing together with you a Piyyut. A Piyyut is a liturgical poem. Most of them are from the Middle Ages, and this one is of Sephardic origin, like many of the Piyyutim are. So if you turn in your Machzor to page 22 and go to the bottom under letter Daled, you'll see that the words of this Piyyut mean, may this year's troubles end and a year of blessing begin.
Amen.
So I thought this was a fitting Piyyut to do. The words are Tichle Shana v'Kilaloteha, Tachel Shana u'Virchoteha. You also have transliteration, and we'll do it to a traditional Sephardic melody. It goes like this. First we'll do the melody, then we'll add the words. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Lai 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 lai. Lai 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 lai. Lai 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 lai. Tichle Shana v'Kilaloteha Tachel Shana u'Virchoteha Tachel Shana u'Virchoteha Tichle Shana v'Kilaloteha Tachel Shana וברכותיה תחל שנה, וברכותיה. And let's say amen to that.
A hearty amen to that.
We'll continue with Kiddush.
Well,
First, your sermon.
I'll talk a little.
You'll talk a little, then we'll do
and then we'll
Kiddush.
drink a little.
Sounds good.
Shabbat Shalom, Shana Tova. The experience of these high holidays may be best felt by two things. One that will be welcomed, and one you're going to really have to force yourself to feel. And the latter is boredom. Now, a lesser rabbi could offer a dozen jokes about the rabbi compelling Jews to be bored in shul, but I'm not that rabbi. Well, if it's before Kol Nidre, I guess I can break that vow already. So I do have a joke, and it's as old as Moses, and it's one that I've told before. It's about Mr. Cohen, Mr. Cohen's son. Mr. Cohen's son says, "Dad, how come you go to shul?" What kind of question is that? Well, I know you're a non-believer, an atheist, or an agnostic, or whatever. So why do you go to shul? Well, Goldberg goes to shul. What kind of answer is that? Son, Goldberg goes to shul to talk to God, and I go to shul to talk to Goldberg. Now we laugh at that joke, or at least I hope you're at home laughing. It's a joke that every rabbi, synagogue president, or gabbai roaming the aisles has in their back pocket, and at least for me, I break it out on a triennial cycle. But the joke illustrates two things that I want each of you to feel these high holidays, and one is by omission and the other is by commission. The first time I used that joke, it was as a text to demonstrate the idea that coming to shul solely to be social, even for the acronym I used then, JFK, just for Kiddush, is not a laughing matter, but it's actually built into the fabric of our tradition. Obviously, in nearly all meaningful ways this year, we cannot really be Cohen. Yet another equally important truth about Cohen's experience has been rendered immeasurably more difficult this year, and that's the feeling or the experience of boredom. We as a society are very uncomfortable with being bored, and a smartphone really destroys that possibility. And I think boredom is the wordless prayer on the margins of our liturgy. It's the nigun, the silent, wordless prayer the authors of our prayer book, the editors of the Machzor, were pushing us towards humming. But if I'm really going to offer a commentary on a joke and make some assumptions, I think Cohen, Mr. Cohen, actually misses the crucial meaning that he absorbs by being bored. Boredom is something that we, as religiously progressive Jews, do not realize is actually a part of the prayer experience. Boredom is where friendships blossom and bloom into community. Boredom is the locale of reflection and the place that we can become lost in that reflection. We have so few places left. And this year, like every year, allow yourself the sanctity of being bored. Growth will sprout from its soil. And once you allow yourself to quell the voices of stimuli and can sit quietly and comfortably within your boredom, then I'm asking you to open yourself up to the margins. Every year at this point, right now, on Erev Rosh Hashanah, I encourage you to turn to the margins, the outsides of your Machzor, where there is wonderful prayers, meditations, and commentary on what's in the center of the page. They help us find meaning and kind of locate ourselves in the prayers that can be too foreign or distant to relate to. And this is an experience that is, one, wholly traditional, and two, it's meaning-making. Prayer is an experience, one that can happen in many different forms and begins when you open your heart, not when you open the book or your voice begins to chant its words. There is wisdom on the margins, and the destination is meaning. and the map leading the way does not end in Hebrew, nor does it end in the center. It is this experience that led me to want to lean into this idea, the idea that we will be experiencing these high holidays away from home, away from the space, the community that centers much of the awe we usually experience. So throughout Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you will hear from and see many of your fellow community members, and they will offer their thoughts on the prayers, texts, and the sounds of the high holidays. I thought especially this year, having your fellow community members offer their meditations on a prayer or an idea would be much more interesting and compelling than hearing them from me, standing in an empty sanctuary, preaching them to you. These videos will be interspersed throughout services, and they're here to remind you that we are in this together, that our voices will rise in song and prayer together. Praying by yourself will not be easy, and it will not be much fun if you see it as a viewing experience. You need to be able to get yourself to the place of realizing that this experience needs to feel like a remote version of Rodfei Tzedek. So it's my heartfelt prayer that you are sitting in a room and can see each of your fellow community members in their sacred spots. But this year, you're also going to get to hear their sacred thoughts. We'll be bringing the experience of the margins, the thoughts that are in your heads, and we're going to bring them to the center. I have seen each video, and I can tell you that they are, of course, brilliant and inspiring, but more importantly, they are filled with warmth, the warmth of community, and remind us all that in the spaces away from the center, we can find depth, purpose, and growth. So I'm asking you to stay with me, to stay tuned and stay engaged, and may we all be blessed with a happy and healthy year. Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova. We now turn back to our Machzor, and if you're able to, we ask you to rise as we say the Kiddush together. Page 24.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pnei hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol am, v'romemanu mikol lashon, v'kidshanu b'mitzvotav. V'atiten lanu Adonai Eloheinu be'ahava, et yom hashabat hazeh, ve'et yom hazikaron hazeh, yom zichron trua be'ahava mikra kodesh, zecher litziat mitzrayim, ki vanu vacharta, ve'otanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim, udvarcha emet ve'kayam la'ad. Baruch atah Adonai, melech al kol haaretz, mekadesh hashabat, ve'Yisrael ve'yom hazikaron. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehechianu, ve'kiyamanu, ve'higianu, lazman hazeh.
Before we turn to Aleynu, I want to bring you to our first video from one of your fellow community members. Over the course of the summer, I spent time studying with a group of Rodfei members, and each group took a prayer, and we studied it in depth, and then each of those learners offered a video, a meditation on their thoughts on that prayer. So here we have our first one from Hal Weitzman. And Hal is actually in the group that studied Kol Nidre, which, of course, will be next week. But his thoughts really roamed all from Kol Nidre backwards to the Shofar. And we're going to listen to those thoughts now.
Shana Tova. I want to ask you to do something you might not have been asked to do before, which is not to listen to the sound of the shofar. This idea came to me from a discussion with Brian Rosner, Anna Siegler, Nancy Jacobson, and Sherry Gutman. It was organized by Rabbi David, and it was wonderful to spend time with these people preparing and learning ahead of the high holidays. Thanks to all of them and to Rabbi David for organizing. Our group looked at Kol Nidre as a springboard for our discussion. We didn't come to any firm conclusions, but it did seem clear that the prayer was at some level about clearing something out of the way so we could get on with the real business of repenting. You could think of Kol Nidre a bit like the small print, the fine print, the legalese that comes very fast at the end of drug commercials, except in our case, we put it at the beginning to get it out of the way first. It's strange then that this should be such a focal point. We wolf down our food, we make a mad dash to the synagogue, we shout at the kids along the way, we rush to get into our seats, all to be there for what is really just a legal disclaimer. It's really just throat clearing, mind clearing, heart clearing. The shofar is similar. We often describe the shofar as an alarm. Well, an alarm is only meaningful in terms of how you react to it. The prayer Unatana Tokef provides a clue as to what we should actually be listening for. The prayer talks about what happens in the heavens on Rosh Hashanah. The great shofar sounds, it says, and then a small whisper is heard. The shofar tells us to be quiet so we can hear the small whisper. What is the small whisper? I think of it maybe as the breath of the Creator still within each of us, or perhaps the voice of the heart, the voice that's always there but is drowned out by everyday sounds and worries, or perhaps the soul, our connection to the eternal. It's personal, but it's not something we develop in isolation. It comes from listening to other people. It tells me what's really important, what I should be doing, how I should be behaving. I need the big noise to help me hear the small whisper. In the same way, an African-American friend told me recently that she thought the coronavirus helped to reveal to society the extent of racial injustice. We can fixate on the virus and hope the world will go back to normal, but the injustice reminds us that we should be doing better than the normal of 6 months ago. And in the same way, Rosh Hashanah has the same message. We don't want to go back to the way things were. We can do better than that. We are Rodfei Tzedek, pursuers of justice. Almost alone among the Jewish communities in our city, we have this very active name. We are in pursuit. How can you pursue justice? The whisper will tell us, not the shofar. And once we've heard that whisper, let's share our thoughts and our creativity with each other to ask ourselves as a community, what can we do to pursue justice? Shana Tova. I wish all of us a year of health, a year of pursuing justice, and a year of helping to build a better world.
One of my favorite.
Turn now to Aleynu on page 25, and if you're able to, we rise.
Aleynu shabeach ladon hakol, latet gedula leotzer breshit, shelo asanu kigoyei haratzot, velo samanu kemishpechot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, vegor alenu kecho hamonam. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא של נוטי שמיים. על כן נקבל לך אדוני אלוהינו. נתקן עולם במלכות שדי. כי המלכות שלך היא, ולא מעט תמלוך בכבוד, ככתוב בתורתך. אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
Today, on the 1st of Tishrei, new member Erwin Esser Berman, Samuel L. Bazark, Abraham Kasseloff, William Cody, Edith Goodman, Florence Hirschman, Genevieve Lazarus, and Anna Sloan. May their memory continue to impact our lives. All those observing a yahrzeit or saying Kaddish, if you are able to, we rise for the Mourner's Kaddish on page 26. Yigdal b'yikadash shemei rabbah, b'amla divrach urute, b'amich malchute, b'chayechon uv'yemechon, uv'chai decho Beit Yisrael, b'agula uzman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam omer maya. Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitmonan. V'yitadar v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekutsha b'richu. Le'ela kol mikol mirchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran b'amala v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleynu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'ramav hu ya'aseh shalom aleynu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Again, Shabbat Shalom, Shana Tova. I'm always aware of how grateful I am to work with Rachel and how grateful the Road Faith community ought to be to have Rachel. But as we're standing in here, just the two of us, with me and my voice and Rachel with her voice, I'm acutely aware of how lucky we are. And I hope you don't mind me standing here silently while swaying and enjoying your davening. So
you should be silent or you can sing. We're all lucky too.
Well, Jeremy wouldn't have to be pretty quick with the mic to mute me in order for that to happen. So we'll save that for, well, hopefully not for next year. So Yasher Koach to Rachel for leading us. And there's a whole lot of people to thank, and I'll leave that for another time. But I want to take you behind the camera and say Yasher Koach to the person organizing this and doing all the technical things here, Jeremy Port. It's probably the first time that someone has ever said the words Yasher Koach to you, Jeremy. It means you done good. And sitting next to Jeremy that I can see is our very own Leanna Dillaway, our office manager, who has been behind the camera, or at least behind the mute button, at nearly every single Shabbat service and other service we've had for the last however long it's been. So, Yasher Koach to you. If that's your first time, I hope it's not the last. Tomorrow, we will begin right here at 9 a.m. If you want to do a Pesukei de Zimra, the introductory part of the service, you'll have to do that on your own. We're leaving that in the bullpen this year. We will begin with the Shacharit service, where Ed Hamburg will lead us. And then throughout the day, there's a variety of places for you to go to schmooze or to pray or to learn. And you'll have to check out the slides to do that. But you can also email us to get any of that information. So we will do that. And we will conclude with Psalm 27, conveniently located on page 27. And then Rachel will conclude with Yigdal after that. So thank you for joining us. Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova.
LeDavid Adonai Orivishi Mimi'ira. Please join me as I sing toward the top of the page in the bolded letters in the Hebrew. Achat Sha'alti, one thing I ask of Adonai, this I seek, to dwell in the house of God all the days of my life, to behold God's beauty and visit in God's sanctuary. Achat sha'alti me'et Adonai ota avakesh. Achat sha'alti me'et Adonai ota avakesh. Shivti beveit Adonai kol yemei chayai, לחזות בנועם אדוני, ולבקר בהיכלו. לחזות בנועם אדוני, ולבקר בהיכלו. כי יצפנני בזוכו. לולא האמנתי לראות בטוב אדוני בארץ חיים, קווה אל אדוני, חזק ויאמץ ליבך, וקווה אל אדוני. We conclude our service tonight with Yigdal on page 28 in the melody that is traditional for the high holidays. And so let me take this opportunity also to wish everyone Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova. And thank you, David, for everything. And in particular for being here on this very unusual but still special Rosh Hashanah Eve. Yigdal. Yigdal Elohim chai ve'yishtabach, נמצא ואין עת אל מציאותו, אחד ואין יחיד, כייחודו נעלם וגם אין סוף לאחדותו. אין לו דמות הגוף ואינו גוף, לא נערוך אליו קדושתו. קדמון לכל דבר אשר נברא, ראשון ואין ראשית לראשיתו. הינו אדון עולם וכל נוצר, יורה גדולתו ומלכותו, שפע נבואתו נתנו אל אנשי סגולתו ותפארתו. לא קם בישראל כמו שעוד, נביא ומביט את אמונתו. תורת אמת נתן לעמו אל, על יד נביאו נאמן ביתו. לא יחליף האל ולא ימיר דתו, לעולמים לזולתו. צופה ויודע סתרנו, מביט לסוף דבר בקדמתו. גומל לאיש חסד כמפעלו, נותן לרשע רע כרישתו. ישלח לקץ ימין משיחנו, לפדות מחכה קץ ישועתו. מתים יחייאל ברוב חסדו, ברוך הדיין שם תהילתו. מתים יחייאל ברוב חסדו, ברוך הדיין שם תהילתו.
Enjoy your dinner. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Shana Tova. Min Amen.